This is the UARKFCA Timeout, the podcast where coaches and athletes share what God has done and is continuing to do in their lives. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I got Alexandria McCraney, Women's Director of University of Arkansas FCA, with me in the studio. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad to be here with you, Ryan.
Yes, I'm thrilled to have a teammate in the studio with me. We love talking to the coaches and athletes, but now I get a teammate to kind of vibe with here in the studio a little bit. Alex, tell us a little bit about your story. You've been with FCA for a little while now.
I have been with FCA for a long time.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. So my journey with FCA started as an athlete at Mississippi State University. I played basketball there, and a teammate of mine was involved in the ministry. I was not a believer at the time. So my sophomore year, this girl walks on. I'm doing my thing. I'm living my life, essentially trying to find my identity in, anywhere and everywhere. And what I notice about this girl that walks on my team is that she seems to have a sense of peace. And I didn't. And so I understood the difference between how I was living and what she seemed to be experiencing. And that drew me in. So I would ask her questions essentially about her faith, even though I don't know what I was asking. But I just really wanted to know, how are you the way that you are? Because I want some of that. And she would share Christ with me, invite me to her dorm, and talk to me about having a quiet time and what it looks like to walk with Jesus. And I'm like, a quiet time? You sit in the corners? It's time out? What is this? But it was beautiful because she just really allowed me to see firsthand what it looked like to walk with the Lord and how that changes your life. And like I said, she was involved with FCA and invited me to a meeting. Josh Gilreath was the director at the time, and heard the gospel again in that space among other athletes. And it was at that meeting that I received Jesus for myself. I put my faith in what he did, dying on the cross for my sin in order to make me new so that I can have a relationship with him. And ever since then, it's just been a journey. I fell in love with the work in the ministry of FCA, myself as a recipient and somebody who has been discipled throughout, and wanted to be able to share that with my teammates. And so what that looked like is me, engaging my teammates, sharing my faith with them, inviting them to meetings, and I have been on staff pretty much ever since. So, yeah.
Wow. So, okay, to clarify here, there was a time in between being saved and being on staff where you had already started doing the work of the ministry.
Yes.
And then you joined staff.
Uh-huh.
Did you join staff at Mississippi State, or was the journey different from there?
Yeah, I joined staff at Mississippi State. Right after I graduated, I came on as an intern and then eventually came on full time. So, yeah, when I became a believer, they had to force me to go to class. I just wanted to sit with people and talk to them about Jesus. I just was so impacted and just fell so in love with Christ and what he had done, and just the knowledge of the word and the scriptures, how they would not change. And I was so used to so many things in my life changing and not having a firm foundation. And so it was air to me. And I just really desire for my teammates to experience that. I'll share one story just to maybe encourage some other athletes out there. But my life was radically changed, and I was so desirous of my teammates to know him, because these are my friends, right? So something rocks your world, you want them to know too. And I remember, one of our leaders saying, okay, let's gather a Bible study, kind of like a huddle. And after practice, we'll go and go to the locker room. So I remember inviting my teammates. I was super excited. And after practice, we went into the locker room and nobody came. And we waited and nobody came. And I just remember crying and being so broken over that. And I just remember saying, I just want them to know. I just want them to know. And our leader at the time, she said, it's okay. Let's just pray. So we went into our locker room, and she just kind of led us to pray over each one of my teammates' lockers. And I will tell you, throughout the next 3 years, over half of my teammates came to faith.
Wow.
So just to encourage, when the Lord gets a hold of your heart, yes, it is for your benefit, but also he gives us a burden for the people that we love and have influence with. And it is a grace to be able to see him also transform those in our sphere. So that's just, an example of an experience that I had as an athlete.
Well, that's a beautiful story of, you thought it was the end of the world in that moment, but it was just the beginning of something, which is amazing. So tell us a little bit about now you've joined staff, okay? Mm-hmm. You've elevated from intern to full-time staff, and the progression of that, because you obviously you're not just at Mississippi State anymore. Right. You're at Arkansas. What would the journey from there to here look like?
Yeah, so I was at Mississippi State and got to serve, all the women's sports teams there. I ended up being able to be our women's basketball chaplain at, where I played at Mississippi State, also with softball and volleyball. So it just was a beautiful time getting to disciple young women in the scriptures. And one thing that I love to share is the women that discipled me, it was beautiful because not only did they share with me God's word, but they invited me into their life. So from the very beginning, that was kind of my paradigm of what discipleship is. It's not only getting in the word, but it's also allowing people to see, what does it look like to walk with Jesus as a woman, as a wife, as a mother. And so that kind of set the trajectory for me in terms of how I would also live that out. And so I had people in my home as a single woman all the time. I remember making brownies and chili and just doing life and playing games and getting to connect, which is also how I met my husband, Cortez, who was a football player there. But FCA ministry also took me back home to Memphis, Tennessee, where I got to also serve in the inner city high schools and do ministry in that space and be able to develop curriculum so that women or young girls could see the lives of women and how their lives in the scriptures were impacted by Jesus. So stories of Ruth and Rahab and Esther. And what we know is that God is the same today and yesterday and forever. And so if he was faithful in their lives in that way, how much more so does he desire for us to have similar stories of his faithfulness? So got to do that there. And then Cortez and I got married. So their journey took us to Texas, and then now at the University of Arkansas, where we have been, for a little over 9 years now.
Wow. Now, the theme that I feel like I can't help but to notice throughout all these stops here is this emphasis on ministry to women.
Yes.
And here you are now serving as the women's director at the FCA at the University of Arkansas. And not only that, but you've also kind of, in addition to that, developed a tool that I know many women have already benefited from.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the tool is the Pattern Seasonal Planner, and essentially it's a framework. And so for me, like I said, one of the things that I was privy to was kind of getting the inside scoop in the lives of women. So how did they walk with Jesus in seasons of singleness, in seasons of becoming a mother, in seasons of having, maybe teenage children? And I got to see that in the lives of many different women, a diversity of women. But there was some consistent things in all of their lives that I remember. And I remember, regardless of season, relational status, children, no children, the consistent thing was their relationship with God, their own attentiveness to their mental and emotional and physical well-being, the relationships that they had with others, whether that be family or friends or church community, and then a commitment to the work that God had given them to steward. And so what I would call those categories is prayer, person, people, and then profession. And so the tool is essentially that framework. And so when I became a wife and a mother, trying to navigate and get my footing in this new space, I drew on that. Like, regardless of the laundry or the dishes or the urgencies that might pop up day to day, there are things in my life that I know are to stay consistent, and that will be an anchor for me in my own flourishing. And how can I be faithful to those things? Because that was what was modeled to me. And so I began to just say, okay, every day I want to be with Jesus. I want to sit at his feet and hear from him, because I can't do this apart from him. Every day I'm going to do something to take care of my physical and mental well-being, because if I'm not well, then that impacts how I show up for others. And each day, you know, how can I love the people that are in front of me that God has entrusted to me to either disciple or to serve or to help? And then how can I be faithful to the calling that God has placed on my life, in the home, outside the home, both, right? So I would apply that, and then I started sharing it with other women that were trying to grapple with how do we steward these different roles that we have well. And one thing I will say is Jesus is the only one that has done all things well, but we can do a few. And for me, the 4 pillars are the few things that I want to be faithful to do well, regardless of the season. So we'll share that with other women, and I was encouraged to put it in a format where other people could use it and run with it if it was helpful for them. So that's essentially what it is. It's each day making a decision to be intentional in those 4 pillar areas.
And for the record, right, this isn't exclusive to women, right? Guys can benefit from this too.
I mean, it's pink and cream. I don't know.
Okay, so the colors of the colors may not be as appealing to guys, but the practices are very much relevant.
Absolutely.
Oh, I know, because I've tried it, and I think it's helped me a little bit. So, well, that's amazing. So, you know, one of the things, kind of the tradition of the UARKFCA podcast here, is I always like to ask the question, what's God been teaching you lately? And I feel like you've got, at least from a ministry perspective, over a decade of things that God's been teaching you, and plus stuff before that even. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you to hone it in. Let's say just this year, Alex, what's God been teaching you lately, like in this season of your life?
That's a great question. What is God teaching me? I mean, I've been reading Nehemiah and Esther, and this morning, what struck me is that in both of those stories, God strategically placed his people to have relationships with people of influence, in both scenarios, kings, in order that he might preserve his people. And, you know, in the story of Nehemiah, he was serving the king, and he wanted to go back and rebuild the walls for the flourishing of God's people. In the story of Esther, she would eventually be married and have a relationship with the king, and she was positioned in that scenario to preserve the flourishing of the people. And I think what resonates with me in those stories is considering, where has God placed me? What influence do I have? And how can I use that to seek the flourishing of God's people, the people that already belong to the Lord, and the people that God is drawing to himself. One of the things, even as I have started to pursue life coaching, is that I realize I am so deeply committed to the flourishing of women, because I am a recipient of women who were deeply committed to my flourishing. At the expense of their comfort, at the expense of, you know, they had families, but they made space for me, held space for me, invited me in, listened to my dreams and my heart and my worries and my concerns and my struggles. And so I feel a God inviting me to play that role in the lives of women in a unique way, and to use my influence to also seek their flourishing. So just considering, how has he positioned me? What gifts has he given me to steward? What voice do I have, and how might I utilize that for the flourishing of women?
And on that, right, you have, because you recently have become a certified coach yourself. You mentioned that, you alluded to that a moment ago. Yeah. And you've been able to use that or practice that and be certified in that too. Do exactly what you've just said. Yeah. Right? That's Do you want to expand a little bit more on that role that because that's like now another hat that you're, in addition to wife, mother, like women's director, like
right.
You've got another hat called certified coach now.
Right.
And what has that looked like lately?
Yeah. So I have been on this journey. I think I've always been interested in, like I said, holding space for women. And I've done that, with Bible studies and discipleship. And so I feel like this is just another layer in terms of when it comes to coaching and as a believer, we partner with the Holy Spirit as he holds space to really bring to the surface what is in people's hearts, what is he doing in the lives of people. And a lot of times we don't get to have people to intently listen to us in a way that draws out things that by ourselves we are not able to process alone. So being able to ask questions and get to the heart of the matter, and really coaching is a creative process where we partner with the clients to take them from where they are to where they really want to be. And another layer of that is going from functioning to flourishing. Mm-hmm. So what are the obstacles in our way that are keeping us from living into the things that God has for us, which we know is abundant life, and that looks different in different seasons. But we know God from the very beginning was intent on our flourishing, so much so that he sent his son in order for us to do that and experience life. And so it's just another way, another tool in my tool belt that I get to come alongside women.
Flourishing. Feels like that's the theme of, I don't know if it's your life. I don't want to put that on you, but I mean, that's like, I hear that over and over from everything from Mississippi State, where you felt kind of that presence of the Holy Spirit, all the way up until now. It's how can I help other people, other women flourish in the Lord the way that I felt it.
Yeah, right? For sure.
Alex, thank you so much for joining me in the studio today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for telling us about your journey, what God's been teaching you, the coaching, Pattern Co., the planner. It's been an amazing experience. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and the work that you do. We're so excited and proud of how God is using your gifts. We really are. Yeah, you're a great teammate.
You're going to make me blush. Thanks, Alex.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of UARKFCA Timeout. If you enjoyed the story, learned something new, or both, consider subscribing and sharing this episode with a friend. You can follow us online at UARKFCA. And always remember to take the time out to recognize that you have a powerful story too.